Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the latest webinar from Columbia Business School Executive Education. Today's session is entitled Survive in Today's Dynamic Environment with Breakthrough Strategy, and it's our pleasure to have with us today Professor Willie Pietersen. Before we begin, I just want to draw your attention to the chat window on our screen here. You can use that chat window throughout the presentation in order to ask questions. I'll be reading the questions as they come in, and I'll present them to Professor Pietersen later on in the session. And now let me introduce Professor Willie Pietersen. Professor Pietersen was raised in South Africa and received a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford University. After practicing law, he embarked on an international business career. Now, over a period of 20 years, he served as CEO of multi-billion-dollar businesses such as Lever Foods, Seagram USA, Tropicana, and Sterling Winthrop's Consumer Health Group. In 1998, Willie Pietersen was named Professor of the Practice of Management, at Columbia University's Graduate School of Business. He specializes in strategy and leadership of change, and his methods and ideas, especially strategic learning, are widely applied within Columbia's executive education programs, as well as in numerous corporations. He's served as a teacher and advisor to many global companies, including Boeing, Deloitte, ExxonMobil, Novartis, and Girl Scouts of the USA, and he's the faculty director of one of our great programs here, Creating and Executing Breakthrough Strategy. He also has a number of publications out, but a recent book called Strategic Learning, How to Be Smarter Than Your Competition and Turn Key Insights into Competitive Advantage. And with that impressive resume, I'd like to welcome Professor Willie Pietersen to our program this afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Many thanks. Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this webinar. I look forward to sharing my ideas with you about creating winning strategies in today's turbulent environment. Let me just say at the outset that I belong to the pragmatist school of thinking. I believe that the test of a good theory is its usefulness in practice. A good theory has problem-solving power. So in this vein, I'd like to offer you a small handful of key ideas that work together to enhance the practice of strategy. Now, if we want to do something well, we first have to understand what it is and what success looks like. So in pursuing this topic, here are the questions I would like to address. So, and the answers we seek here are actionable answers to these questions. What is strategy, and why do we need it? Second question, what are the essential decisions that strategy must produce for us in order to be useful? And how are these different from planning and budgeting? Third question, why is strategy everyone's job and not just those at the very top? Next, what is the best process for creating winning strategies, practical process? And finally, how can we turn this process into an organizational capability? So let's start with understanding what strategy is at its essence and what it must do for us. First, let's ask ourselves a fundamental question. What gave birth to strategy? Why does it exist as a concept? Now, the answer to this question is a very stark truth. There's only one reason we need to have a strategy in the first place, and that's the reality of limited resources, which in turn leads to competition. So strategy is the necessary response to this inescapable reality. Now, if we had unlimited resources, we wouldn't need to have a strategy. We could solve all our problems by just endlessly throwing resources at them. But as we know, no entity on Earth has unlimited resources, whether it's a business enterprise or even a country. So what this means is that strategy is about making the best choices on how to focus your scarce resources in order to achieve competitive advantage. That's the essence of it. It's about choosing what you will and will not do. So let's think about this for a moment. We talk about making choices, but a choice is not really a choice. until you decide what you're going to give up. Otherwise, it would be just piling it on. And the more things you pile on to what you're already doing, the more it dilutes everything else. And it's this challenge of deciding what you will not do that makes strategy really hard to pull off. Now, let me give you an example. IBM, which I think is a high-performing company, sold its personal computer business and focused on services and software. So it made some fundamental choices. It sells only to businesses and to governments. It leaves out the consumer market, leaves that to others. HP, on the other hand, went the other way. It bought Compaq in 2001 and sells to both consumers and businesses. So it hasn't been as rigorous about deciding what it will not do. So as we look at this, in the fourth quarter of last year, IBM stock was 4 times greater in value than that of HP, which I think tells us a lot. Now, so strategy about making choices, but it's not just an open-ended process of choice-making. It's choice-making with the aim of answering some very specific questions. Here are the questions. Where will we compete and what is our aim? That's the first level of choice-making. Second, then, how will we win in our chosen markets? Third, what will be our priorities? And finally, how will we align our people and our business system behind our strategy? Now, the answers to these questions will shape your destiny. Each one of them represents a layer of choice-making and a decision about what you will not do. Now, the final point on this slide, point number 4, is that there is an inherent tension between focus and flexibility. So the process we use must enable us to learn and adapt as the environment changes. We have to have focus to succeed, but if we just stick to one path and not adjust to the changing environment, then we can become extinct. So that's essentially the challenge. So let's just sum this up. Here are the critical strategic choices, just depicted on one chart. Note now that the centerpiece is the statement of an organization's winning proposition. And I'd like to explore this concept a little further. So let's look at this idea. It's a very central idea. Please note the definition of a winning proposition. And I'm going to just read it quickly for us. An organization's winning proposition defines how it will win in the competition for value creation by answering 2 critical questions. 1, what unique benefits will we deliver to our customers which provide a compelling reason for them to do business with us? Question 2, how will we translate this exceptional customer value into superior financial returns for the enterprise? It's easy to do number 1 if you don't also have to do number 2. And that's the centerpiece of one strategy. Now, I ask companies to banish the term value proposition. My problem with a value proposition is that it leaves out the most important question of all: how much value? In a competitive world, absolutes have no meaning. Everything is comparative. Our challenge is not merely creating value, it is achieving value leadership, hence the need for a winning proposition, not a mere value proposition. The big thing to bear in mind here is that customers have choices. It goes to the very heart of what a customer is. If they don't have choices, they're not customers, they're hostages. So the big question is, why should customers choose to do business with you? And investors also have choices. Why should they give you their money? And I would make the argument that the magnet that attracts customers is the same magnet that attracts investors. The way that I ask you to think about this is, at the end of the day, you don't sell products, you sell benefits. For example, Miracle-Gro fertilizer is not just selling fertilizers, it is actually offering the benefit of a very lovely green lawn that is the envy of your neighbors. So the winning proposition is the central idea around which an enterprise will organize its decisions and activities. Let's just look at some quick examples, good examples of winning propositions. These are called hedgehogs, a term used by Isaiah Berlin to denote an entity that is guided by one unifying idea. He contrasted hedgehogs with foxes that are scattered and diffused. So successful companies are hedgehogs, not foxes. Just glance through these quickly. Each one of them a very terse, stark statement. Take Google, the top one. What does it do? What is its winning proposition? There are three very powerful verbs. We organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. So everything that Google does is in service of producing that outcome. I'll just take one more. Just take the bottom one, Hallmark cards. It doesn't sell cards. It says we help people connect with one another and give voice to their feelings. Very valuable benefit. If you look through each one of these, you will see a common factor, and that all of these companies define their offerings as benefits, not just as products. So let's move now to the application of these underlying ideas. And the first question is, whose job is it to make the strategy in an organization? It's a very important question. And the answer I'd like to offer you is that it's everyone's job. To achieve unity of action in a complex organization, strategy must be translated to every level in the organization. So note now what the starting point is here. The very first task for every leader in the system is to develop a clear line of sight to the strategic goals of the enterprise, and then translate those into a winning proposition and key priorities for his or her domain of responsibility. So it's line of sight first, then translation. Let me offer you a quick metaphor to think about this. Imagine somebody, a business person walking past a construction site. You may have three workmen, and you say to the first workman, "What are you doing?" And the answer is, "I'm digging a hole." Second workman, "What are you doing?" "I'm laying bricks." And the third one, "I'm building a cathedral." Well, what leaders do is describe the cathedral, so they're able to say to somebody digging a hole, "You're not just digging a hole, you're building strong foundations, so this cathedral will stand for 1,000 years. Somebody laying bricks, you're not just laying bricks, you're creating a wonderful, beautiful facade, so that people will come from 1,000 miles to admire this lovely cathedral." And this is what leaders do: define the cathedral and translate that into meaningful work. Now, to apply these ideas within an enterprise, we need a method, a systematic business process that will produce the right outputs. The old static methods no longer work. They are not fit for purpose. In a dynamic environment, we need a dynamic process that enables us to become an adaptive enterprise. Now, the process you see here, the strategic learning cycle, is such a method. It's now widely applied by numerous enterprises, such as ExxonMobil, Ericsson, SAP, the Girl Scouts of America, and numerous others. Strategic learning represents a shift from strategy as planning to strategy as learning. The process involves 4 interrelated steps that are depicted here, and these steps build on each other. The 4 steps are learn, focus, align, and execute. So let's just briefly describe each one. The learn step. Here you develop insights into the external environment and the organization's own realities. The technique to do this is called a situation analysis, the essential starting point for strategy creation. Move to the next step, focus. Apply these insights to make the essential strategic choices that we've talked about. The central idea here is your winning proposition Everything you do in strategy creation leads here. And everything you do in strategy execution leads from here. So think of your winning proposition and priorities as grand central. Third step, see at the bottom of the cycle is align, and you see there described as the essential business levers in any organization, and the key is to align all these levers of the business system behind your strategy to make it work. Final step is execute. Develop the business plans to implement the strategy. And then you see there a learning loop so that you can continue to adapt as you learn from your actions and respond to the changes in the environment. The distinguishing feature of strategic learning is that it offers a practical process for organizations to continuously renew themselves through learning and adaptation. I'm going to give you this metaphor to help you think about strategic leadership. Imagine that as a leader of your unit, you have your hands on the large wheel at the top of this gearbox. And when you turn this large wheel just a little bit, you make all the smaller wheels below you spin faster and faster. Your job as a strategist, whatever level you operate at, is to turn this big wheel on just the right issues. So finally, let me summarize the main points that we have covered. These are the things that strategy must do for us, and there are 5 key things. Number 1, it must define an organization's winning proposition as the central idea around which it will organize all its decisions and activities. A frame of reference. Point 2, it must promote commitment and not just compliance through participation in the process. Point 3, the goal is to produce unity of action by translating the strategy to every level in the organization. It's everybody's job. Point 4, the idea here is to always keep the main thing, to maintain an intense focus on the few things that matter most. Complexity paralyzes an organization, and simplicity empowers it. And the 5th point is it needs to embed the organizational capability to learn and adapt as the environment changes. So those are those summary points. And I now welcome your questions. And in doing so, I'll put the strategic learning process back on the screen as we conduct our dialogue.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this presentation, Professor Pietersen. And as a note to those of you who are listening, we are now taking questions, so you can submit them by text, and I'll relay them to Professor Pietersen. I'll start with a question that came in just recently, and the question is, do successful companies always have to deliver quote-unquote unique benefits, or is it sufficient to deliver benefits that provide a compelling reason to do ongoing business? This recognizes that there is some inertia once a favorite brand has been chosen, and customers know that the so-called unique benefits are often overstated. And the example the questioner makes is, Mazda makes good cars, but they're not unique vis-a-vis Toyota or Nissan.
Yeah, well, I think the key question we need to answer is, do you have a compelling reason why customers should choose to do business with you? If you're not clear on that, it's very hard for customers to develop clarity about that choice as well. And the way I like to portray this is that I don't think at the end of the day there is any such thing as a commodity. On either end of a transaction, no matter what it is that you're transacting, are human beings. And often the distinguishing feature of your offer lies in your service expertise. So what I like to do is, working with companies, is to ask them to create 2 elements to the winning proposition. One is the product performance promise that you make, and the second is the customer experience that you're offering, and the 2 work together. So if you have more or less parity in your product performance, you can distinguish yourselves through the quality of your service. If your product performance is lacking, it'll be almost impossible to rescue that with superior service. So at least parity on the product performance. Hopefully you're at the leading edge of always innovating and offering something that customers really like, as opposed to a static product, but always working on the customer experience component of it, which is often the distinguishing factor. I just look at Amazon, for example. The books that it sells are not different from the other books that are on the market. Now, obviously, it offers a very powerful price, but think about the service component of what Amazon does.
That's great. Thanks, Willie. It seems like there's a lot of emphasis on, when you talked earlier about the folks digging the hole or putting the bricks down and creating a foundation, but really you talked about, use the phrase, define the cathedral. And a lot of folks are asking sort of some questions around that. What is the approach to thinking about what is the story or this narrative I need to create, both for my external customers and internal? And are they different narratives?
Well, there can be different narratives, but they lead to the same result. What one does with customers is deal with the first part of the winning proposition, which is what is the compelling reason that you can offer why customers should choose to do business with you. Now, what you have to do for your investors, of course, is translate this into superior financial performance, but that's not something that you would necessarily discuss with your customers, although they understand that if you're going to be there in the longer term, you need to have a healthy financial result. So provided they get what they seek, then it's okay in their eyes for you to do this, but that's not something, obviously, that you will emphasize to them. Now, the internal issue is a very important one. And here I would just make this point, that the end product of a strategy is not just a document. Although the document is important to clarify your thinking and create a common frame of reference. At the end of the day, it's a compelling leadership story that you're able to portray to all of your people that creates vivid mental images in their minds and activates and motivates them to act. So this is a very important thing, and that's why I offer you this metaphor of a cathedral. It's a similar thing in the military. I have done considerable work with the Army War College in Carlisle in Pennsylvania, which is called the Postgraduate School for Generals. It's a very interesting thing because strategy was originally a military concept. And what the generals are trying to do is not just issue battle orders, which is do this and do that, but do a framing exercise called commander's intent. What's the ultimate purpose of what we're trying to do? And that really is, at the end of the cathedral, because then people can make decisions day by day with that frame of reference, knowing always what it is that they're solving for.
That's nice. On sort of a similar note, folks are, talking about how the idea of simplicity is a great idea. We all want to achieve that and be able to focus our energies, but sometimes no matter how much we might ensure that is the goal and that times ahead will be easier once we focus, change initiatives can be very difficult, and folks might resist just because there's change involved in sort of refocusing the mission of a company. How do you get other folks on board, folks who are saying that this strategic learning process makes sense to me, I'd like to implement this in my organization? How do you sell that to other folks?
Yeah, well, I think you sell through participation. People like to be involved in the choice-making as it gets translated down to the various layers in the organization. And they want to participate in the sense-making and the development of the insights that lead to the choices. There's a wonderful quote, and I've forgotten who said it first, and that is this: the difference between being told an insight and discovering it for yourself is like the difference between an arranged marriage and falling in love. So there is great power in participation, but that doesn't just mean open-ended, freewheeling participation, but people following a process that is engaging. And the final thing I would say about the ultimate leadership task and one of the crucial roles of a strategy is to create increasing simplicity in a world of increasing complexity. And if we're not able to do that, we can't lead effectively. And one of the things this strategic learning process does is it forces us to define with great clarity our winning proposition and our key priorities and how we will align. And so there is a map, if you like, that creates unity of action and clarity around the mission of the organization and its priorities.
Professor Pietersen, a lot of folks are chiming in with questions regarding process and timing. So that folks are looking at the visual in front of them and saying, how often do I need to repeat this process? Between cycles here? Is this an annual process we go through, quarterly? Maybe it depends on the business.
Yeah.
How would you advise folks to think
well,
through that?
here's the starting point. How often do you do a budget? Now, the budget is a financial expression of a company's strategy. And therefore, you should be doing your strategic thinking at least as often as that. Although, as I'll point out at the end of this comment, you never really switch the lights out on thinking strategically. Here is typically what organizations do and what I recommend, depending on the, how fast your marketplace is changing. Every 3 years, a deep dive, if you like, using a clean sheet to explore and develop insights. And in the intervening years, what I call a refresh, which prior to budget time, you simply use this process and start with the situation analysis you did last time and simply ask yourself, what has changed? On the basis of those changes, you then ask yourself, to what degree do we need to adjust what we're doing and adjust our priorities, etc., sometimes in a minor way, sometimes in a large way. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, a large number of companies had re-examined their entire strategy in the light of this, and it was a good time to do a deep dive regardless of when you'd last done it. So when the circumstances shift, then you need to do a deep dive to address those. Now, the final point I would make is I really like the idea of ongoing learning so that there are always small teams of 2 or 3 looking at what's changed about customer behavior and customer needs, what competitors are doing, how the industry has changed. And when you do a strategy retreat or even your operations update meeting, you have some report back that is by nature strategic, that is looking at the external environment and looking at the necessary internal responses.
That's great. Thank you. We have time just for another question here. So I'll ask one that just came in, which is, how do you view the relationship between corporate strategy and business unit strategy, and how should one drive the other?
Yeah. Well, at a corporate level, the choices are mainly about what businesses should we be in. That's not a business unit strategy. Within the business unit, you need to make choices about where you will focus. But the basic portfolio of a business, if you take GE, for example, it's not for the jet engine division to decide whether or not it wants to be in the jet engine business. That's at the corporate level. And that establish the overall parameters of success. How will we measure success? That's at the corporate level. What are our ultimate goals? How will we organize the enterprise? What should be our ethical standards and major priorities? Then at the business unit level, you get really into the detail about customers and their needs. Because back to GE, what customers need in the light bulb business and what they need in the diesel engine or jet engine business obviously is customized to those particular businesses. And then you do a winning proposition within each one of those divisions based on that evaluation, as long as you're always referencing back to the cathedral, which is the overall goals of the enterprise in total. And then each function, whether it's HR or finance or whatever it is, also needs to have its own winning proposition. For me, there are no cost centers in an organization, only value centers. And the question for us is, let's take HR as an example. The big question is the value that you're creating greater than the costs that you're incurring? And you're always competing against something, even if it's external benchmarks of excellence. and that will determine your winning proposition.
That's great. What a great way to wrap things up. Thank you so much for your time, for being here, Professor Pietersen. It was a great presentation, and some great comments coming in from folks who've been listening to us online. For those of you listening online, I just want to welcome you to, actually, Professor Pietersen, if we could go to the last slide, that would be wonderful. Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks to all of you for joining us today for this great presentation. And thanks so much for your questions. We appreciate your interaction and your choice to spend a half hour with us this afternoon. We will make the presentation available to you as an archive. We'll send out an email to you. And we invite you to learn more about our upcoming programs, gsb.columbia.edu/execed, and also to join our ongoing conversation on LinkedIn. After this event, you'll see a link to our LinkedIn group, so join us there. We often have a number of discussions, and we'd like to continue these great conversations in that forum. So thanks again, Professor Pietersen. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thanks to all of you for being with us today. We hope to see you soon, either at an executive education program or at one of our upcoming online events. Thanks so much. Take care.